We welcome back to the Morning Magazine. His name is David Stokes, a policy analyst with the Show Me Institute. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good morning, Manny.
Well, we have a very, very full docket. In fact, three different things that we need to talk about here this morning on the Morning Magazine on News Talk KRMS. Let's start first of all with Tuesday, with the election. We had previewed this last week. And talking about the 12-cent levy increase that the Mid-County Fire District was asking for, I'm sure, David, you've seen the results, and that measure went down pretty hard.
It went down to a solid defeat. You know, the voters have spoken, and they, I trust that they judge what their needs are for their local fire services, and they decided that they wanted to keep their money, which they have every right to do, and are willing to accept some level of cuts in the fire service. Well, it remains to be seen what those cuts are. I think it was, a poor example for the fire district to say in prior articles that one of the things they might have to cut was the intern program. So that was a bad example. I think the voters probably said, all right, we'll cut the intern program and pass on the tax increase.
Well, here, I guess the fire board is going to meet next week. I believe they meet a week from today, and the night of the 14th, and they will start to discuss what is going to have to be done. A lot of different things have actually been mentioned, and there is a bit of criticism coming out today, again, not necessarily saying that it was wrong that they were asking for the increase, but maybe they didn't do enough to inform the public, kind of what you and I talked about a little bit last week, of what this would really mean if the increase doesn't pass.
Well, and that is sort of the job of people in these positions when they ask for tax increases, to really get out and get before the public and go on shows like yours and in the papers and in public hearings and sort of make their pitch. And obviously, whether they attempted to do it and whether they thought they had done enough, obviously they didn't, or maybe they did, and voters just decided that they wanted to keep more of their money and not have the tax increase. Whatever the reason, the voters spoke pretty clearly. And as the articles I'm reading say here, the voters in the area have turned down a number of tax increases over the past several years here. And I would think that the fire district would now wait a couple of years at least before asking for another one.
Well, and the other, thought or the other news that's out today is the numbers, and you saw those as well, that only about 10% of the registered voters in the fire district came out to vote. But, we kind of visited about that last week, too. When you get in these November, only one item on the agenda type elections, that's unfortunately, that is typical.
It is typical, and it's one of the reasons why it's tricky to put these ballot questions on such obscure elections, because sometimes the thinking is, like for a June school board election, and I don't have a specific example here, that you put the school board tax increase on the June ballot because you're confident everybody affiliated with the school district will be able to show up and vote that day. But the risk you have with these sort of lesser attended elections is maybe the people that are motivated and out there and really the ones who show up in the polls are sort of the anti-tax crowd, of which I'm generally a member, and so they show up at the polls because they want to have their say and not pay any more taxes. So there's certainly a risk when you don't put these things on the standard April ballot, which at least generally gets about 20 to 25% turnout.
Now, I do know one of the things that the fire district has not addressed is if they will go back to the voters again next year to see if they could pass this a second time. Is that something you could see happening depending on what cuts they have to make? If they are very deep cuts, as they're mentioning, they're already in their reserve funds, could they go back to the voters again?
Well, they can. I don't think there's any rule for most of these tax increases limiting how often you can go. I do think it's improper to do it too quickly. I don't like it when governments ask for a tax increase, it gets rejected, and then 6 months or 1 year later they're back asking for another one. So I would hope the fire district or any district that loses a ballot, particularly one where the vote is pretty decisive against it, I would hope that they would wait at least 2 years or more before asking for another one.
Well, we will see what happens. We'll keep following this story with the Mid-County Fire District. Again, they meet next week to begin to decide what cuts will be made, and we'll see indeed maybe one they might go back to the voters at some point. All right, next thing we wanted to get into is looks like we do have a resolution finally in Morgan County. News out of Morgan County today that the commission has accepted, and I think this is interesting, and I want to get your take on this, that they've accepted a settlement offer with the treasurer who had filed a back pay lawsuit. The commission was going to fight that ruling by that retired judge, but then the treasurer brings them a settlement offer. The commission accepts it, and it looks like it's all done.
And that's great. I mean, everybody really wins in this situation, and that includes the taxpayers of Morgan County. I mean, this is anybody who looked at this issue in this lawsuit. If you looked at it, you were trying to be neutral and unbiased. It was hard not to agree that the treasurer deserved some level of back pay. And we've talked about this in prior weeks and a few times. There's really no argument that she didn't deserve something. So then you can dispute over what the statute of limitations said, and the judge, who knows a lot more about the statutes than I do, said that it doesn't apply and gave her $90,000 plus interest and other fees. And so you can quibble about those things, but she deserves something, and she was wronged by the county paying her less than the other officials. So she won her lawsuit, and then I'm impressed by her willingness to say, all right, I've won here, let's try and settle and end this now. And good for the county commission to sort of get their wits about them and say, yes, a settlement is best for everybody here, for the county commission, for the treasurer herself, for the taxpayers. And again, I think the treasurer herself deserves a lot of credit for being willing to step back a little bit, reach the settlement, and help everybody move on.
I was a little fascinated, though, by the fact that it was the person in question here. The retired judge had said, this is what you should get, but she's the one that approached the commission with a lower settlement offer, and that doesn't always happen with cases like this. In fact, it rarely happens, I think, with back pay situations like this.
Well, I'm not an attorney, as you know, but I've got plenty of attorneys in my family, and they will say that as long as it's under appeal, there's always the chance, albeit in this case I think a very small chance, of losing at the next round. So plaintiffs, even after they win, still have an incentive to go back and consider settlements. And the treasurer here did that, but I think she again deserves a great deal of credit for it, for stepping up and saying, let's come to a reasonable agreement here. I'll get some back pay. You'll save some money by not likely losing again in the long run and owing me even more. And we can put this behind everybody so that the people of Morgan County can benefit. And I know that sounds tart. I don't mean it to sound that way. I mean, it's a great thing now. The taxpayers no longer have to fund these legal bills, which they were paying for. The treasurer deserved this back pay, and now she has a good portion of it. And I think it's just great that everybody can move on. These things are nasty, and you just need to wrap them up and end them as quickly as you can.
We're talking with David Stokes with the Show Me Institute on this week's edition of Show Me at the Lake here on the Morning Magazine on News Talk 1150, 97.5 KRMS. Last thing we wanted to get into this morning, a very interesting situation continuing to develop in Sunrise Beach on the west side of the lake. The TIFF Commission, Tax Increment Financing Commission over there, was scheduled to meet this week, but for one reason or another, they couldn't get all the members there, so they've put this off. But they were getting ready to meet because they're having to change some terms with the TIFF. And this, again, is with the new Wood Supermarket project that's over there. The Wood Supermarket opened several months ago now, but now the commission is... a change has been brought to them, and they're going to have to talk about it and decide it. And you've got, let's put honest, you do have an opinion on that.
Well, I am generally opposed to tax increment financing, and by generally I mean almost always. I think it's a bad use of subsidies in the private sector. And this is how warped we've gotten, Manny, in Missouri. That it's basically normal now for a private company that's doing a development, and they've already gotten multiple subsidies here. They've gotten a TIF, they've gotten a community improvement district sales tax that they're authorized to pay, authorized to charge and keep for themselves. And now they're running into some development problems with excavation and other work. And the assumption here is that because you're running into trouble and it's costing you a little more than you had planned, that you go back to the taxpayers and ask them for more. And that's how warped we've gotten. Why isn't it that the developers are on the hook for these overcosts in excavation and other work? That's the way it used to be not long ago in Missouri, and that's the way we need to get back to. The private sector has the risks and the rewards for these developments, and taxpayers and subsidies are just way too involved in it.
It's is this, and this is where I did have to go back, and I've done some research on this, but I'm still a little in the dark here. When you look at TIFs and commissions and things like this, is it normal to have to reconvene the commission for a change?
It's not normal, but that's not to say it's never happened before. I've certainly seen TIFs be revised and go back to TIF commission, so this isn't unheard of. But I would hope that the TIF commission and the city council say, no, we've already granted you 2 subsidies. You have a current tax increment financing plan. You have an extra sales tax you're authorized to charge, and I don't think that's justified here either, but they've got these 2. And I hope they say, this is enough. You will bear the costs, the risks, and earn the rewards eventually here. And that's what the private sector business and capitalism should be about. The assumption that it's costing us more than we expected, so taxpayers have to give us more, is just it angers me, but what's worse is that it's just so common in this state now. That's where we've gotten in this past decade to 15 years or so, where it's just assumed that we're going to do a development, we're going to ask for tax dollars. That's the way it is in St. Louis and Kansas City now. Basically, every large development is subsidized at some point, and unfortunately, it's getting that way in the rest of the state.
It really does seem like every economic big project that comes up, it seems like you hear the words TIF and CID, and other places in the state you hear EEZ, and it's it's one of these things where, the different government leaders will say, well, we need these tools to be able to draw people in. But at the same time, while, maybe it does draw the business in, now you have this situation where potentially this TIF could be stretched out longer and could have more of an impact economically, and not necessarily in a positive way than was first thought.
Absolutely. I mean, they're going to be keeping now the property taxes that they generate. They'll keep all the incremental property tax and half of the new sales tax. And unless the city, county, and the other organizations, the schools, unless they make cuts to make up for that, which they likely won't, other taxpayers are going to bear that burden. Other taxpayers are going to pay higher taxes because in this case, this one development, but throughout Missouri, the many other special subsidies that we have, they get a discount, and other taxpayers make it up. It just isn't right. And with retail, there's not an economist in America who would say that you should be out there subsidizing retail developments in prosperous, successful areas like the Lake of the Ozarks. You really shouldn't be doing it anywhere. In some truly poor, blighted parts, maybe it's a little more justified. But the idea that this makes economic sense is crazy. There are no studies that would suggest that in Missouri we should be doing TIF for retail the way we are. It doesn't work out for anybody in the long run. In the short run, it certainly works out well for the developers and sometimes for the politicians and planners who can now go out and claim credit for it.
We'll keep our eyes on this story, David. I'm sure this is a long way from being over. We'll see what the commission says when they do meet, and I believe that is going to be scheduled again here for the next couple of weeks, and we will continue to discuss it here on News Talk KRMS. David Stokes with the Show Me Institute. Hey, folks would like to find out more, especially a lot of the writing that you all have done about TIFs and CIDs and other economic development tools. Give us your website and then also your contact information.
Manny, enjoyed being on the show as always. And yes, your listeners can see a lot of writing, studies and op-eds and testimonies on tax increment financing and other subsidies at showmeinstitute.org. Again, that's showmeinstitute.org. Or they can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes, and they can certainly sign up to like our Facebook page for Show Me Institute.
David Stokes with the Show Me Institute. As always, thanks so much for the time. We'll visit again next Thursday here on News Talk KRMS.
Thanks, Manny. Talk to you next week.
Yep, you got it. David Stokes with the Show Me Institute is this morning's page number 2 of the Morning Magazine. Page number 3 is on the way. You are